Hey, buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis Kilbin is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and this is part 1 of my review of the brand new Whispers of the Old Gods expansion cards. Now, this was just revealed earlier today. A handful of cards have already been teased, and I'm going to take a closer look at those cards. Now, if you're still learning about the expansion, there's going to be about 134 new cards. It will also bring along the standard format change and a host of other new goodies, it sounds like, as well. But this is really just all about the cards, so I encourage you to read up on the expansion elsewhere. And let's go ahead and dive right into the cards, starting with the first legendary and the titular old god itself, S'thun. This is a 10-mana legendary that has 6/6 in stats and a very interesting battle cry. Deal damage equal to this minion's attack, randomly split among all enemies. So that's something like an Arcane Missiles or an Avenging Wrath attached to the battle cry on this minion. And you might be saying, that's a 10 mana 6/6. Those stats are not very exciting for 10 mana. And that battle cry is just like basically 2 Arcane Missiles attached to it as well. So why is this card any good? It sounds terrible. And that's because of the way old gods are being handled in the expansion, with cards like this one, Beckoner of Evil, which has a battle cry, give your S'thun +2/+2 wherever it is. Now that means whether it's on the board, in your hand, or still in your deck, this card will actually buff your S'thun. So if you play 2 of these bad boys in the early game, your S'thun will suddenly be a 10/10 when you play it, which is a lot better for 10 mana. And its battle cry will actually also do 10 damage randomly split among all enemies. So we've only seen one card that really interacts with S'thun so far. I guess actually a couple cards that interact with S'thun. Twilight Elder is another. They all seem to buff his stats pretty standardly, but we don't know if that's the only way so far. But we can at least say that there is a way to get S'thun to a 12/12 just based on the handful of cards shown today. And I presume it sounds like there's going to be ways to get him to something like even a 20/20. And if you play a 10 mana 20/20, that's still going to be susceptible to removal from cards like Siphon Soul, right? Or Entomb or anything else. But a battle cry that does 20 damage to your opponent's side of the board is totally crazy. Not only could that kill some people right away if it's just 20 damage to the face on an empty board, but it's also very likely to clear your opponent's board of minions as well. So we don't know the full set. We don't know how good this can be. We probably won't even know for a few weeks into the release of Whispers of the Old Gods anyway. But it sounds like there is some definite potential here with S'thun. It also sounds like Big Game Hunter is going to be nerfed in some way, which means even landing a 20/20 on the board may be difficult for some classes, perhaps like Druid, for instance, to actually remove, since they don't have a lot of hard removal options that are traditionally played. So who knows what this card holds in store. It's a little slow at 10 mana, and normally 10 mana cards like this just don't ever take off because the meta is too fast. But when a card like this allows you to totally swing the board almost no matter what, who knows? It might actually be viable in some control style decks. Not to mention the cards like Beckoner of Evil and Twilight Elder actually have solid stats for their mana cost. A 3 mana 3/4, 2 mana 2/3. Those are fine stat allocations. So I don't think you're going to be penalized too hard in order to receive the buffs that these cards offer. So that deck archetype might actually make some sense and work, depending upon the other cards that buff S'thun. Apparently, there are 16 total. We've seen 2 neutral ones here. There are also going to be some class cards that buff S'thun, but 16 total, so there might only be, like 8 or 10 available in the neutral set to any given class. The other old gods apparently will not have followers like Beckoner of Evil or Twilight Elder. They will just operate on their own with their own unique kind of system. Only S'thun, it sounds like, is going to have this system. So not all of the 134 cards from Whispers of the Old Gods are just going to support buffing the Old Gods themselves. They'll be general purpose cards as well. So moving on to Beckoner of Evil, there's really not too much to say about this card because I've already talked about it a little bit with Sethune. It's a 2-mana 2/3, that's fine. It's nothing exciting, but it gets the job done. You won't feel terrible playing this on turn 2, particularly because the buff on Sethune is actually pretty significant. You could kind of envision this as a 2-mana 2/3 with a 2/3 of an Arcane Missiles attached, because you're going to get 2 attack out of it, and even something like kind of a Defender of Argus built in as well, right? There are some very delayed effects happening on this battle cry. But even then, maybe you could set up the next turn. If you play 2 of these on turn 9, and then you have Sethune ready to go, they could have a more immediate impact as well. It's hard to judge this card right now. It's got potential. The pieces and the numbers are there. If Sethune decks are good, I think this could be a very key early game drop for them. Moving on to the next card. This one's just more of a neutral one. It's a 5-mana, 6/6 Corrupted Healbot. Supposedly this is antique Healbot after he has been corrupted by the old gods. You can see there he has some tentacles wrapping around him, some crazy new needles and syringes and all this stuff on his design. And he has a death rattle that complements that fantasy. It restores 8 health to the enemy hero as opposed to yourself. So you gain 3/3 in stats for 5 mana, but you get a pretty big downside that you heal the enemy. This is kind of like a Zombie Chow, but a mid-range Zombie Chow instead of an early game Zombie Chow. And in my opinion, a much worse Zombie Chow. I don't actually see a place for this card anywhere. 6/6 for 5 mana is really not that exciting. Like, you'd rather have a Pit Fighter maybe, or it'd be almost as good. It'd be a 5/6 for the same cost. So why is Corrupted Healbot any better if there's such a big downside? The great thing about Zombie Chow is you tend to play it in the early part of the game when your opponent may have not even taken any face damage, so sometimes the heal will just heal for 0 because they're full anyway. At 5 mana, that's less likely. It's probably going to heal them. In the late game, an 8 health heal to the enemy is even worse than a 5 health heal. And you're not really getting a lot of stats back. Zombie Chow's so good because it's impossible to get that 2/3 otherwise almost that early, and it defends so much aggression early game. This doesn't do that much mid game. It dies to things too easily. Some people will say it has synergies with Priest, with things like Auchenai Soul Priest, so that you could use this as an 8 damage hit to your enemy's face. But the problem with that is that it's going to be hard to kill this exactly when you want to with Auchenai Soul Priest on board. It also comes in mana after Auchenai Soul Priest, so there's some awkwardness there with your curve. Plus, it doesn't die to Auchenai Soul Priest Circle of Healing on its own. So you may have to use your hero power and a Circle of Healing to kill it, which means it's really only doing 6 damage to the enemy face because your hero power could have done 2 damage to the enemy face anyway, which means it's really only 1 damage better than a Zombie Chow in the first place. Plus, you feel a lot worse about killing a 5 mana 6/6 investment. So I don't even think it's good in Priest unless I'm missing some key synergy or combo trick. So to me, Corrupted Healbot is actually a pretty subpar card that I don't think will see much play. Moving on to the next one, Polluted Hoarder. This is a 4 mana 4/2 that has taken our cute little beloved Loot Hoarder and it's given him some purple hair and some horns and some tentacles popping out of his little treasure chest, which is an awfully sad sight to see, but pretty funny as well. And really, it's the same card. Everything has just been doubled. Instead of a 2 mana 2/1 draw a card, this is a 4 mana 4/2 draw a card. So it's kind of the opposite of a Gnomish Inventor, but I think worse. 2 health is just so bad at 4 mana, it just dies to everything. Compare this to something like a Piloted Shredder, which I know is going away in standard format, but still just make that comparison. And this card is just worse in 100 different ways. It's too slow, it's too weak. I don't really envision a world where this ever gets played. The great thing about Loot Hoarder is that you can slot it into your curve at 2 mana. It's easily pinged off, of course, but it still creates issues for your opponent. It tends to gain a similar level of tempo because they usually have to spend at least 2 mana to kill it with a ping or whatever it might be. But Polluted Hoarder is just too big of an investment for that little of a payoff. And Loot Hoarder really only gets played in decks that just need it for the card cycle and don't really care about the body at all. So spending money on the body for Polluted Hoarder just makes it worse. If this was a 4 mana 2/1 draw 2 cards, I think it might actually see some play. It'd be a better loot hoarder in some niche scenarios. But as it stands right now, I think Polluted Hoarder is also pretty bad. So unfortunately, the 2 neutral cards we've seen that don't support Sithun don't look very good. But let's move on to Twilight Elder. This is the other Sithun support card that has been revealed thus far. It's a pretty solid card. 3 mana 3/4 is still quite good on its own. And when it has a nice solid benefit like this one, it's even better. So if Sithun decks are good, this could be a great card. Particularly if you can keep it alive for a turn or two, because you'll note this has at the end of your turn, give Sithun +1/+1. That doesn't say only at the end of your first turn. So if this lives on the board 3 or 4 turns, you're going to give Sithun 3, 4, 5, 6, who knows how many stats. So in a deck like Priest, where you can maybe buff this up, help keep it alive, heal it, you can make a very, very big and scary Sithun that impacts the board of this battle cry even more significantly. So I like Twilight Elder quite a bit, and it's definitely going to be a key piece in Sithun decks. Moving on to the next neutral card, and I believe this is also our last one that has been revealed so far. I know we'll have more very soon, and I'll be doing videos as soon as 3 cards are revealed. I'll do a video, even if it's just 3 cards. But for today, this is our last one. It's the 5 mana validated Doomsayer. Now, I guess the Doomsayer in the past never quite felt validated because the end usually doesn't come. He's either silenced or killed or cleared. But this one is validated. Apparently, old gods have finally arrived, and he was right all along. He's got a nice little smug grin there on his face. And it's a 5 mana 0/7, much like the regular old Doomsayer's 0/7 stats. But at the start of your turn, set this minion's attack to 7. So this is another card I actually don't think is very good. I guess this is kind of intended to be in the mold of like a Fel Reaver, a 5 mana really big body that scares your opponents and forces a reaction. Because it will be a 7/7 if it lives through your opponent's turn after you play it. But that's really risky, because the great thing about a Fel Reaver is sometimes even if they manage to kill that 8/8, they have to sack a couple minions and trade into an 8/8, or maybe even sometimes use their face on a weapon to kill it. So you kind of get a benefit. The Fel Reaver might eat a minion or two or deal some damage to the face anyway while they're dealing with it. But the problem with Validated Doomsayer is they get a whole turn to trade into this guy with no downside, because they make the trades when it's still at 0 attack. So they have like a couple minions on board, and when you play this, they just get to kill it for free and you never accomplished anything. Now, there will be scenarios where it goes off, but even then, you're still just getting a 7/7 for 5, which is nice, but I don't think it's all that strong. There are other solid minions for 5 mana with good stats that don't have a downside or the risk that this one conveys. Now, this deck could have some interesting implications with cards that like pull stuff out of your deck onto the board. It's better when the mana costs are reduced, so maybe like a druid that could get this out on turn 1 or turn 2 or something like that. It could be even scarier. So there is some potential with Validated Doomsayer. I'm not totally condemning this card already. But on its surface level, I don't think it's just a good, strong value minion. I think you're going to have to use some tricks or a very specific kind of deck to ever see this one work. And of course, as with all of these cards so far, the caveat right now is that we haven't seen the whole set. I've only seen, how many cards is this? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards have been revealed so far, so 128 cards remain. So my comments right now come with the stipulation that there might be a card that makes Validated Doomsayer amazing later on in the reveal. We don't know. Maybe Polluted Hoarder will get better somehow as well. There's really no way to tell just yet. But I'm reviewing these cards as they stand right now, and unfortunately, aside from Sithun and his follower cards, which are merely average, I don't think these cards are very good. I don't think they picked a very exciting new bunch of cards to reveal first. They picked some cute cards. I will give them that, but to me, they don't give me a lot of hope just yet. I trust the devs. League of Explorers was amazing, so hopefully they continue that momentum with Whispers of the Old Gods, but only time will tell. So there you have it. That's part 1 of my review of the brand new Whispers of the Old Gods cards. Stick around in the next month or so as we near the expansion's promised release date at the end of April / beginning of May, because I will be reviewing every single card in the set as they're revealed. So thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.